Senator Cruz.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Secretary Buttigieg, welcome.
Morning.
I want to start by discussing President Biden's Disinformation Governance Board, or as many of us are calling it, the Ministry of Truth, that was recently announced. You said in 2019, quote, "The point of defending free speech is not that you expect everyone to be perfectly aligned with every speech act that is protected. It's that that's a fundamental American freedom. It's a huge part of what makes America, America. And when that same flag was on my shoulder, I didn't think of the flag as something that itself, as an image, was sacred. I thought of it as something that was sacred because of what it represented. One of the very things it represented is the freedom of speech, and that's one of the reasons I served." Now, I got to say, Secretary Buttigieg, that's a sentiment I wholeheartedly agree with, and I think most Americans do as well. Simple question, do you still believe that?
Of course.
That freedom of speech should not be subject to censorship by the government?
Sure.
Why is the Biden administration then putting someone who is an obvious partisan, someone who is engaged in the repeated pushing of misinformation, putting them in charge of a board ostensibly directed at regulating the free speech of American citizens?
Let me begin by acknowledging that this is outside of my area of expertise and responsibility as a department. But I should also note that when I was wearing that flag on my shoulder, I was qualified in what the Navy calls information warfare, knowing that the use of misinformation...
Okay, with respect, we got limited time. So should the government be censoring and regulating the speech of American citizens, yes or no?
So that's a complex philosophical question. Obviously, we believe in free speech, but as you know, you don't have the right to yell fire in a crowded theater. If you regard that as the government regulating speech, then I suppose you would have to agree the answer.
Should the government silence voices that are politically inconvenient and that it disagrees with?
As a matter of course, in our domestic politics, of course not.
So why is the Biden administration creating a board to do that?
I believe this is based on the awareness that misinformation and disinformation is used as a weapon against the American
people. So was
people.
the Hunter Biden laptop misinformation?
I'm not familiar with all of the details of those stories. What I know is that Russia, notably, and other players too.
Except it wasn't Russia. It's an accurate laptop. Now the New York Times has acknowledged that after the election, and yet the head of this disinformation board happily pushed out that it was disinformation. That is a code word for things that are politically inconvenient. Let's turn to a different topic. As you are well aware, recently a federal court struck down the mask mandate. When that happened, Americans across the country saw footage of people on planes hearing the announcement over the loudspeaker and cheers bursting out. When I flew to D.C. from Houston yesterday, on the plane, I would say there are fewer than 10% of the people who chose to wear masks. Does it concern you that the Biden administration was putting in place a policy that now a federal court has concluded was illegal, and that a huge percentage of Americans found arbitrary and unjustified?
If I'm not mistaken, most Americans support the mask mandate for flights, but I think a lot of us are also pleased.
So why were they cheering on planes?
How's that?
Why were they cheering on planes?
Look, I think a lot of us have been looking forward to the day when that reverted to being a personal choice. I know I have, and I've been saying so throughout.
So you're the Secretary of Transportation. Is it safe to travel on a commercial airline without a mask?
So people should make their own choice. It's no longer required.
So when you next fly commercial, will you wear a mask?
Depends where I'm traveling to. And
commercial flight anywhere. You're on a plane, you're flying from one American city to another American city.
I'm not sure. It'll depend on conditions that day. I don't have a flight today, but next time I do, I'll think it over.
Okay. So under the current CDC guidance, which is actually posted on the Department of Transportation website, it says, quote, "CDC continues to recommend that people wear masks in indoor public transportation setting at this time." It also says, quote, "Traveling on public transportation increases a person's risk of getting and spreading COVID-19 by bringing people in close contact with others, often for prolonged periods. I and many others are very dismayed with both CDC and the Department of Transportation for the politicization of this issue. But do you agree with those statements?
Well, I certainly support the CDC as the authority in this country on public health determinations. And I share your I share your dismay at the politicization of masks. I think the most important thing by far, Senator, is that whether it's on a flight or a bus or anywhere else, respect is shown to those who wear masks and to those who choose not to.
So let me ask you if you agree with the CDC statement that's on the Department of Transportation website. Multiple pictures came out this weekend from you at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. You weren't wearing a mask. You were having a good time, laughing. There were jokes were being told. How did that not qualify as, to use the CDC's words, bringing people in close contact with others, often for prolonged periods? And why did you make the choice not to follow that dictate?
So I made a personal risk decision consistent with the public health guidance and rules in effect, which, as you know, did not require the wearing of masks in that environment. And I would add, if I'm not mistaken, the CDC mandate for aircraft would have expired by now.
Why is the administration appealing that decision and presumably trying to reinstate the mask mandate even now?
I would not agree with the premise of that question. The reinstatement of the mask mandate is not the same as the rationale for appealing. I don't have the legal background that you do, but my understanding is that the appeal concerns whether the CDC has the authority to do that in this pandemic or in any pandemic, which is completely distinct from whether a mask mandate ought to be applied any given day. And again, as I understand,
are you telling this committee that even if you prevail on the appeal, that the administration is not going to reimpose the mask mandate?
Well, it's not me saying so. It would have expired by today.
Well, but prior to the court decision, the administration kept extending it despite little to no scientific basis for that.
You'll recall the extension was only 2 weeks, and if I'm not mistaken, those 2 weeks would have passed by now.
So are you saying that you don't intend to extend it even if you prevail on appeal?
Well, it's not up to me. It's TSA acting on CDC guidance. But yes, I mean, it is certainly the case, barring something that would have led to an extension, that the mask mandate would have expired, which means that even if the case is won—
And you think it should have been allowed to expire?
Based on the conditions at the time that it was set for 2 weeks, yes. Okay. But again, that's not my call. It's the CDC's call.
Thank you. Senator Sinema.